Okay, we've now started the recording. So this is Peter Larson with the Ottawa Forum on Israel-Palestine. I'm thrilled to be talking to Suha Mousa. Suha, thank you very much for spending a few minutes with us today.
Thank you for having me, Peter.
So Suha, you're with Mossawa, which is a human rights organization focusing on the rights of the Palestinian citizens of Israel. But just before we get into talking about Mossawa, just tell me a bit about yourself. Are you Palestinian?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a Palestinian. I was born in a town nearby Haifa. My husband is from Nazareth, and we are all Palestinians. I have two kids that they were born in Nazareth. But we located to the United States. We live in New York now. And this is part of our job, my job actually, as a Palestinian here in the US, to bring our voice during or through the Mossawa Center and through Friends of Mossawa in the US, to talk about the Palestinian citizen of Israel, to talk about our work with Mossawa Center and among our community in Israel.
Okay, so Suha, you've mentioned Palestinian citizens of Israel. A lot of Canadians may not be very aware of the fact that there are Palestinians living in Israel. I think Israel prefers to refer to you as Israeli Arabs, but I know that a lot of Palestinians also prefer to refer themselves as Palestinian citizens of Israel. So you consider yourself as a Palestinian citizen of Israel?
Absolutely, because we are part of the Palestinian people. But yet we have the Israeli citizenship, we have the Israeli ID. But yes, we are Palestinian citizens of the state of Israel.
And your organization, Mossawa, is dedicated to somehow protecting the existing rights, or maybe the lack of rights, of certain Palestinian citizens. Tell me a little bit about the work of Mossawa, please.
So as you mentioned, we are a Palestinian citizen of Israel. We are 20% of the Israeli population. We at the Mossawa Center is an NGO. Mossawa means in Arabic equality. We monitor the breach of the human rights of Palestinian citizens of Israel. We seek to promote the economic, social, culture, and political rights of our community. And also, as an Arab minority, we would like to have a recognition of this community as a national indigenous minority with its own national culture and historic uniqueness. Currently, and I would like to talk about our work in the last few weeks, we were working to address the massive escalation in the persecution of Palestinian citizens by the government and the police, as well as addressing the rise in racist incitements and discriminatory treatments of Palestinian citizens by Israeli citizens and firms.
So let me just interrupt you there for a second, because in Canada over the last little while, we've heard a lot about the Hamas and Israel, rockets, Gaza, and so on. But we've not heard very much about, a little bit about Sheikh Jarrah. But now after that, things seem to have, based on our media, gone quiet. Is that the way you see it, or is there more tensions existing in Israel now?
It's more tension existing inside Israel now, especially against the Arab community. As I said, we are working so hard in the last few weeks, and we are continue to do that because hundreds, thousands actually, of Palestinians were arrested by the police forces. We have hundreds of indictments against young people in the Arab community who were participating in demonstration or peaceful demonstration inside Israel, because they want to bring their voice against the evacuation of the Sheikh Jarrah, against the war on Gaza, and also against the incitement and discrimination against our community.
So these are not people who've taken up arms to fight against Israel. We're not talking about an armed insurrection against?
No. We are not talking about an armed demonstrations. We are talking about peaceful demonstration. We are talking about people who wanted to go out to the streets and to raise their voice against the policies of the government, against our community, and to silence us, what they are trying to do, but also against the occupation, against the Sheikh Jarrah, and against the war on Gaza.
Mm-hmm. Now, I think I read somewhere on Haaretz that your president or chairman, I'm not sure, your boss was arrested. Is that?
Absolutely. His name is Jafar Farah, and he's the general director and the founder of the Mossawa Center. A few days ago, actually, when I spent 2 months back home in Israel, in part of my job as an executive director in the Mossawa Center. And when I wanted to fly back to New York, all these events happened, and all the flights were canceled. So I stayed through all these events there, and this is, from my end, it was a good, because I wanted to stay there and to keep working on these important matters. But as for Jafar, a few days ago, as I said, he was brought into a questioning by the Israeli police. During his questioning at the police station, he was accused of organizing young people to harm Jews, Jewish people. A bizarre and completely unfounded claim to anyone who knows Jafar. Jafar is they dedicate long advocacy work. He is a very well-known as a human rights activist. But eventually he was released. He was investigated for 2 hours. He was released, but we see this as a human rights organization and as an Arab community. It was an act in order to silence him on his work, which exposed the grave violation and abuse of power by the police and the Israeli government. And the police decided to intimidate him as well as his family. By the way, his son was also brought and was arrested for 2 days by the Shabak, the Israeli security agency, but he was released just like that. So eventually he was released. And this act was part of the government and the police to silence the activists and to frighten the Arab community, to say to us, look, even people who are working legally and who are working as a human rights activist, we can silence them, we can frighten them, and we can bring them to investigation.
Maybe you can just clarify something. I know that Palestinians in the West Bank face administrative detention, where they basically have no rights whatsoever. They can be arrested, held for whatever length of time they want, and so on. When someone like Jafar gets arrested, is in the Israeli court system, first of all, there's the legal level, and then there's the practical level. But at the legal level, could he get a lawyer? I mean, what kind of representation could he have, or was he just released before that?
Yeah, he got released before he got to the court. But this is a good question, because what we are facing now, by the way, we are facing, for Palestinian citizens, that we have almost 2,000 arrests. With over 70% actually of them being brought before judges to extend their detention. Some of these arrests were done against innocent people, and that they were bystanders, that they didn't take a part of these demonstrations. As for some of these people who were arrested, they were minors. And you know what? Even in the state of Israel and in the legal system, some of these minors didn't get the chance to meet a lawyer by a court, how you call it, the decision, because the Shabak was telling the court that this is an ongoing investigation and he haven't got finished this investigation. So even people and young people didn't get the chance to get a lawyer. And we are talking about minors like 14, 16, 15 years old. that they haven't been under arrest in their lives. And just imagine what could happen inside the jail and inside the interrogation and investigation.
Once again, to clarify, we're talking about young Palestinian citizens of Israel. They have an Israeli passport or whatever.
Absolutely. And you know what? Also, we have a political arrest, like including Jafar. We have several arrests that have been done against council members in the mixed cities, against activists, not only like leaders in the Arab community, and they are still having got a chance to be released, like Sheikh Kamal Khatib, that he is from the Islamic Party, that he's still in jail almost for 2 weeks. And he is a citizen of Israel.
Now, I'm not a particularly courageous person. I find that if I were in your shoes or their shoes, I'd be quite intimidated. Is this wave of arrest, do you think, let's take it from the Israeli point of view, is it being successful in basically teaching people a lesson that supporting Sheikh Jarrah, going to the mosque, and so, or even presumably in some cases waving Hamas flags when Hamas was exchanging blows with Israel? Have people been intimidated? Does it make them angry? What's your assessment of the mood of the Palestinian citizens of Israel?
Absolutely. I want to say it this way: fear, frustration, helpless, and defenseless. When we see extremists marched in the streets of the mixed cities shouting death to Arabs, when we see these extremist settlers attacking our homes, attacking our businesses, waving with their guns against people that they were protecting their neighborhoods inside Israel. We are not talking on the West Bank. We are talking in Haifa. We are talking in Akka. We are talking in Lod, in Yafa. This is inside Israel, and this is what is happening against our community. When we see the police forces having this storming into our houses in the Arab localities and also in the neighborhoods, Arab neighborhoods in the mixed cities, arresting people. Some, I said, who were minors, and this is still going on. What we are facing now is the campaign of law and order that the government wanted to have more and more arrests among our community. They are aiming to have almost 500 people that will be arrested. This is similar to what Trump did with the African American during 2020 when George Floyd was murdered, and he had the law and order against the demonstrations, among the African American. So, and I would like also to address one issue, if I may have, if I have some few minutes.
Go for it.
So I want to say that the Israeli media and the Jewish extremist politician like the Minister of Interior Affairs took a major part in the incitement campaign against the citizens, against the Palestinian citizens, as well as Prime Minister Netanyahu himself called the Palestinian society in Israel as an interior enemy in a broadcast live stream. Also, as I said, so far we have 233 indictments against Palestinians. You know how many indictments we have against Jewish mobs? Only 30, okay? And until now, organizations and pro bono lawyers from our community have been working so hard defending these young people. But given that this situation will go on for months and maybe years, that cannot go on without minimal support to the families in terms of the legal fees and paying for lawyers. And this could not get, if these people and these young people could not get a proper representation in the Israeli courts, these young people could face unjust verdicts and long years in prison.
Would you say that since the Nakba, this is an unprecedented wave of repression? Or is that exaggerated a bit? Have there been periods before?
We experienced this way, yes.
Wow.
When you silence our leaders, when you silence our right basic right to express the freedom of speech.
Right.
This is an oppression.
Well, Sue, I'm sure you'll be happy to know that official Canadian government policy is to support human rights all around the world. That's our official policy, but actually we apply it only in certain countries, and we haven't paid a lot of attention to human rights of Palestinians in the state of Israel. Suha Mousa, thank you very much for spending a bit of time with us. I will put a link to the Mossawa website up, and so people will be able to look on that. And does Mossawa accept donations from North Americans?
Yes, absolutely. We have a 510c3 in the US. So yes, please, anyone can help to support our work, to support our providing the support to these families and to these young people. That will be very helpful. And
maybe we'll get a chance to come back to you again, not talking about police repression, but talking about some of the other work that Mossawa has been doing for a number of years. That would be my pleasure. So, Suha, thank you so much. Take care of yourselves and we will get a chance to talk again soon. Okay.
Thank you so much.